So I finally read the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series, and I wanted to do a video talking about my ideas about the first season of Game of Thrones versus the book A Game of Thrones. So that's what the subject of this is. And Enchantment of Eternity, who I will be talking a bit about in this video, like his position on this, which is something that I really agree with, in that really especially the first season and the first book, neither one is better than the other. You know, both have their strengths and their weaknesses. And although I have to say, overall, I think I like the first season of the show better than the first book, if I'm being totally honest. But not to say that there wasn't things that are certainly better about the book. Probably the biggest one in Enchantment of Eternity, like I think that this was his number one thing too, is that you don't get the history and lore watching the show like you do when reading the book. And when I first started watching the show, like, it was really hard to figure out all what was going on, to try to keep track of all of these characters, because Robert's rebellion was, you know, this huge thing in the show's history. And for a visual medium like a TV show, maybe they should have put more, you know, scenes from that in there in flashback. Like that would have made things more easy to follow, because yeah, like all of these characters who were a big deal, like we never actually see them, even though they're important to the show's history. So to actually see them in a TV show would have, you know, given their presence in the story now and what they mean to the characters in the story now more impact. I think Enchantment of Eternity said that, like, if he was making it, like, his prologue to the show wouldn't have been the Three Nights Watchmen. It would have been, I think, the Battle of the Trident, at the end of the Battle of the Trident. Like, that's what he would have done. For me, I would, like, my prologue scene would have been the tourney at Harrenhal, because there, you know, that it had all of the major players of the rebellion, you know, much of the major players of the first season of A Game of Thrones. It has the reason for why the rebellion started. I don't know if Aerys was there, you know, in the universe of the books, but he could have been there in the show. Like, we could have seen his crazy ass. We could have, I don't know, was Viserys alive then? You know, maybe even see him, and we would have been like, oh, that baby there is, you know, this crazy guy years later. So yeah, it would have connected much better to the rest of the story of what's going on in the now time. Like that's what I would have done, where I would have put it. Other stuff that's better about the books is some character stuff. Like, I think I don't think I like Robb better as a character, but I certainly feel for him more in the books, because it's very obvious that you know, he wasn't ready for any of this at all. You know, he wasn't even ready to be Lord of Winterfell, let alone King in the North. And the scene that made me cry while reading this was when he tucks Bran into bed, and he's trying to convince Bran, really trying to convince himself that, you know, their family is all going to come back together soon, and you know, it's obvious that he's just trying to make himself believe it. and Bran grabs his hand, and I cried quite a bit reading that, because it's especially sad when you know what happens to Robb, where a person this good and this sweet did not deserve what ends up happening to him. Yeah, it's very sad. Other stuff that I like about the book more is Sansa. I think she's a more complex character. I mean, for one, we get to see her be witty. We don't get to see that at all in the first season of the show. She is, in the second, when she like stealthily insults Joffrey. But, she, on the King's Road, she sees Ilyn Payne and she gets scared, and she's kind of like put on the spot, and Cersei comes up and says, oh, he's supposed to be like scary to be the King's Justice, and Sansa says, oh, well, he was well chosen, and so she broke the tension and made people laugh. And another big thing that really isn't in the show is her relationship with Sandor, and I know Sansan has quite a following, and even only reading the first book, I can see why that is, because I think, her relationship with Sandor, obviously, it gives a lot to her character, where we can see that she has more going on in her than just being this girl who wants to live in a fairy tale, that she does have a lot of compassion in her, that she's able to see like good in people, or maybe see herself in people to understand them. And I think Sandor, like, a reason why he's so protective of Sansa is because I think he sees some of himself in Sansa too. And something that's like big in the show is or to me, what comes across in the show and how Sandor is written and the actor's performance is that Sandor probably would have been a very different person had he not had his brother, and if he lived a different life in a different situation as the same person, he would have grown up to be a different man than who he is now. And that's even more reflected, I think, in his relationship with Sansa. So I can certainly see the appeal of Sansan in the books. In the show, I think Sansa is either going to end up with Tyrion or Jon Snow. I think for her that seems the most likely. But in the books, who's to say? One thing that I thought was kind of strange, though, when, I know that Sansa, like, tells the Queen about their plan, part of their plan to leave King's Landing, like, why didn't Eddard ever warn Sansa about them, coming to a dangerous place? Like, he gives Arya a lecture about standing by family and about being united and about looking out for each other. But he never gives such a lecture to Sansa, never tries to caution her. I mean, against Cersei or Joffrey, when obviously Ned thinks that Cersei could have killed Jon Arryn. So it's like, why he never gave her a lecture or a warning. Like, it seems if he would have done that, like, she would have never told the Queen about her father's plan for them to leave. So not to blame Ned or anything for that, it was obviously Sansa's fault, but yeah, it seems like that was a pretty big oversight on Ned's part to me. Okay. Hmm. Okay. One other thing, I guess this isn't a better or worse, but Peter to me is so much more creepy in the books than he is in the show. Like in the show, he seems more sly and calculating, but in the books, he has like this air of just like slimy creepiness to him, and it's just like really unsettling. Like whenever he's in a scene with Sansa, like shivers run down my spine. And I go, oh my God, you're so disgusting. That's not a better or worse thing, but when I read that, I'm like, oh my God, you're so gross and you're so creepy. Um, so yeah. And Daenerys, one of the things that was handled better in the book is Daenerys' decision to do that spell to make Khal Drogo well again, because in the book we know that if Khal Drogo dies, she's going to be a Dash Kaleen. She's going to be sent back to her, and her baby are going to be sent back to Vaz Dothrak, and she's going to have to live out her life there. You know, where that's totally not part of her plans. You know, she wants to go back to Westeros and take back the throne and all of that crap. Um, so yeah, like we know that if like that'll put a huge end to her plans if Khal Drogo dies. In the show, it seems much more like a love makes you stupid moment where it's so very obvious that this is not going to turn out well for her. So yeah, I think that in the show they should have made that more clear, like what was going to happen to her afterwards and how it wasn't. Yeah. So yeah. Um, there's a lot that I liked, like I said, more about the show. One of the big things for me was Cersei. Like she is in the books, like she seems to be a way more petty, one-dimensional character who's just, you know, evil for the sake of being evil. Whereas in the show, we get hints of a person who could have been a very different person had, you know, Robert been a better husband to her, and how she loved her son by Robert, versus in the show or versus in the book she like got it aborted. But in the show, like she actually gave birth to the baby, and it died, and she loved the baby, because she loves her children, and they seem to extend like her soft spot for children to Sansa a little bit in the show. And you even see that in season 2 as well, when she talks to Sansa after Sansa starts menstruating, and you know, giving her womanly advice. Um, so yeah, like Cersei is a much more complex character in the television series, and I really love her character in the television series. I mean, I didn't love her in season 5, but yeah, and something and a tragedy in her relationship with Joffrey is that we see in the first season like her lecture Joffrey about, you know, the kingdoms and ruling, and we can see that Joffrey listens to her and, you know, takes her advice and all of that. So it, you know, makes him turning from her and no longer listening to her, no longer caring about her opinions. You know, we feel sympathy for Cersei, that, you know, that her son is lost to her now, and that adds another dent of tragedy to her character. So yeah. Another thing is Caitlyn and Ned's relationship in the show is their relationship is much closer, you know, much more intimate. Like, because in the book series, to me, it seems like their love for each other is entirely based around their kids. Like, they don't really much like being in each other's company. They just, it's all about the kids for them. Whereas in the show, they actually laugh and smile and joke together, where they don't do that at all in the books. So it's clear that they actually like each other. And in the book, actually, the scene before Liza's letter comes to, Caitlin, Master Luwin gives her the letter. Her and Ned are having sex in the book, and she like thinks to herself, "Oh, I hope I get pregnant again." um but in the show, like, they're cuddling in bed, they're telling a joke with one another, they're discussing Ned's future, and what, like, if whether or not he's gonna say no. So, sex is obviously not the same thing as intimacy. And that, I think that, book to show, like, that's a good illustration of that fact of Caitlin and Ned. And yeah. Um I also liked the reaction to Ned's death better in the show, because before, in the book, like, Master Luwin is giving this really long lecture. I forget what about. It's basically like an info dump, and then it's like, oh, we're sad we learned about Ned's death. Where in the show, it, at Winterfell, where Bran finds out, it's a very quiet scene, and it's a very simple scene, and it lets entirely the acting and the music do it, and bring you to that emotional place. And there's a thing in screenwriting about not overwriting scenes, and how that's another thing as a filmmaker you have to be aware of, is when words aren't needed in a scene, and how instead you can let the atmosphere of the scene do its magic. So yeah, I think that plays better. Also, in the book, like, Caitlin and Rob are more like demure and respectful when Ned dies, versus being, breaking down and crying, which feels more real and visceral to me. And also, like, Caitlin being a mom, and how she is, Robert's strength in that moment, is also quite touching to me, because, like, she, leans, against a tree, after having put on a brave face for all of the lords, but then, like, she sees Rob's pain, and, like, she's sort of like, that totally supersedes her own. So, like, that feels more heart-wrenching for me. One other thing that I guess is better about the show is that it seems that they there are hints pretty early on that Roose Bolton is evil. How, like, he was all, like, gung-ho to kill Barristan Selmy, and how his guys, like, got into a fight with some other guys when they came to Winterfell, when the banners were raised. So yeah, and I think in the next book there's even more, like, hints of his evilness. So his, like, the Red Wedding is way less of a shock in the in the books than it is in the show. Like it seems to me clear already that there's something up with this guy. Like he's not a good guy already with me just reading the first book. One final thing that I like about the show more is Renly, because in the books Renly just kind of stands around and smiles smugly like a haughty French noble, and at the end he just takes off with the storms and army, and just leaves King's Landing, and we never understand why he does that, besides just a naked grab for power. Whereas in the show we see with his relationship with Loras, which Loras in the book, like, all he exists to do really is get fawned over by Sansa. So his relationship with Renly gives Loras's character something to do, like, whereas he had hardly anything to do in the book. Where and I also think it means something that Loras believed in Renly like that, believed that he would be a good king, and we also see evidence of why maybe Renly wouldn't be a good king, but certainly a better one than Robert was, which isn't exactly much of an accomplishment, I know, but it's certainly there in the show, and it also makes it sadder when he dies, because he could have been a good king, or at least a serviceable ruler who seemed way more intelligent than Robert was, and he also inspired love and loyalty in people in a way that Stannis really didn't in the show. So yeah, Renly, much better character in the television series, and Loras too. So yes, I believe that is all that needs be said about my opinions on the first season of Game of Thrones versus A Game of Thrones. What do you guys feel about my opinions? Do you think they're wrong? Do you think some of them are right? Okay. Sayonara, auf Wiedersehen.